Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. We'd like to welcome everyone. We want to shout out to Steve Buckholz from the Sheriff's Office who's joining us today. What you'll see from the agenda that we sent out, we put some timestamps to try and hopefully keep everyone on time or keep the meeting on time because we ran over quite a bit at the last meeting. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from June 9th of 2020. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to the minutes as written? Do we have a motion to, I'm not seeing any, do we have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes from our last meeting.
Second.
Motion from Lori, second from Jennifer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I think it's unanimous. All opposed, same sign. The motion's carried. Our next item of business is the PowerPoint presentation on decreasing jail usage. I assume we're going to see your screen, Mike.
Yeah, pulling it up right now. I always forget I have to do these things exactly the right order.
Hey, while Mike's doing that, it looks like we have Tamara Cash still as an attendee, not moved over to panelist.
Oh, yep, and Darren's there too. So
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for noticing.
sorry, Tamara and Darren, I was clicking other buttons, but now you should be in. All right, so as many of you know, this is really a special scheduled meeting. After our last meeting in June, we talked about how COVID has impacted the jail population, court processes, and that we feel there's an urgent need to address jail usage so that we can maintain social distancing and 72-hour observation periods in the county jail. And so the group has been continuing to meet every couple of weeks and is working on things. And so today we're going to have this group of key criminal justice stakeholders present what they have been doing and what they're currently working on. But we sent this presentation out to you ahead of time. Hopefully you had opportunity to review it, and we really want to encourage the group to have some conversation and some problem solving. So feel free to ask questions, feel free to make suggestions as we move through this, because it's kind of all hands on deck. The brainstorming is wide open. So each member of the coordinating council, or of the kind of a user of the county jail, has been encouraged to decrease it by 25%. Simply how we arrived at that number was in 2019, the average daily population of the jail was 203. And as you heard in the presentation last month from Captain Hauk and from Captain Hauk and from Captain Simmons, that we need to be at a functional capacity of about 150, 155. So that's about a 25% decrease from where we were in 2019. So we're going to ask each member to share steps that they have taken over the last 5 years to manage the population as we are. We feel that's important to remember what we are doing and what we have, resources that have been put in place. And then they're going to talk about current initiatives that they've implemented. And before I have Trent McKinley go here, I need to change screens so I can add in Anthony Sanchez. Oh, it looks like I have to stop sharing to do that. Hold on one second, folks. And then Melinda Zeliox is waiting to come in too, so I'll add her. And I can't see the attendees, panelists, and chat while I'm doing share screen. So someone feel free to yell at me and we'll make that adjustment as we go.
I can keep an eye on it for you, Mike.
Thanks. And let me see if I can promote you, Sarah, so that you can just move people over. Maybe. There we go. Okay. I should have done that earlier. Sarah, you can move people now. Thank you. All right, so Captain McKinley, I believe you're going to present on the behalf of the Lawrence Police Department.
Yeah, we just wanted to touch on some of the things that we've been doing, and this reaches back into 2019. This conversation originally started with some of the, I don't want to say more extreme, but more deliberate things that we had done during COVID to divert people from jail, but been asked to expand a little bit more on that to reach back into 2019 and talk about some of those things. Some of the initiatives that we've been doing, and it actually predates 2019 in some cases, is increasing the number of cite and release. So for misdemeanors that occur within our presence that don't involve life safety and things like that, we have an opportunity, or we have a decision to make as far as either arresting or issuing a notice to appear in court. So we have largely used the notice to appear in court or the cite and release on the street as one of the tools to avoid us taking individuals into custody and custodially transporting them out to the jail. We've also done some things as it relates to diverting individuals to the hospital when appropriate. Some of those things, the obvious would be the mental health type situation. The vast majority of our officers on the street have received the 40-hour crisis intervention team training. So they recognize individuals that are in mental health crisis, especially as it relates to activity that may technically be criminal. If a more appropriate place to transport that individual is to the hospital because this is tied to a mental health crisis, we've been doing that with significant regularity, especially since we've had the mental health team in place over the past 2.5 or 3 years. We've also got the mental health team co-responder program, which cobbles onto that. In addition to the majority of officers that have CIT training, we've had either one or sometimes two officers that worked exclusively with a clinician from Burt Nash to address those types of individuals that are in mental health crisis and try to get them into the appropriate treatment rather than into incarceration. We've also had just generally a reduced emphasis in going out and serving a lot of warrants. Part of that had to do with some changes that occurred at municipal court as it related to bond conditions. So if there was an own recognizance bond and essentially taking an individual into custody and transporting them out there was going to result only in them immediately being released, oftentimes officers chose not to serve that warrant and referred the individual to the court so that they could get their warrant resolved. I've also been asked to just kind of touch on some of the things that we're doing to analyze our numbers. So we have decided that it is best for us to create a data group that gets in and looks at some of the data that we have in Spillman. As many of you know, we have a shared system in Douglas County between our computer-aided dispatching with all the county agencies, and that's all county public safety agencies to include fire. But we also have a shared system that manages jail and all of those things. We all contribute to those data points, but it's been difficult at best at times to be able to pull meaningful data out of that system, especially if you're not an analyst. So, and we've also realized that sometimes when the county would pull data, it would look a little bit different than when the city pulled data. So we're getting those individuals together from the city and county to sit and look at what data we have in Spillman, what that means, and then more specifically to look at least for Lawrence PD, exactly why our arrests were down for 2019 and kind of put that more into some statistical sort of summaries. So, Mike, did I miss anything that you and I had discussed that you wanted me to touch on?
No, sir. I think that covers it really well. Did anyone have any questions for Captain McKinley?
I don't know that we need to answer this now, but I think at some point in time in the future, I'd like us to be able to dig a little deeper into co-responder and how the program's going. Is it ready to expand some of those conversations? But just as a note for future conversation.
Sure, I'd be happy to help with that.
I wonder, is the police department starting conversations with the team from Northeastern about how to incorporate the data that they're generating into some of these discussions as well?
I guess the short answer is no. So we have talked about a number of things as it relates to the data that has been collected so far. One of the things that we have noted, and this was presented at an earlier meeting, is that we had a large number of stops that fell into a quote unquote other category because it wasn't one of the data points that on the front end we decided that we were going to try to capture. I don't think the consultant group realized that our percentages were going to be so high in that so-called catch-all category. So we're focusing more on, do we need to change the data that we're collecting so that the data in the end can be more meaningful? So that's our focus at this point.
Yeah, and Chuck, I think too, you know, the consultants said back in May that we haven't reached a critical mass of data yet where they're preparing any recommendations. So none of the police departments have received recommendations to follow up on other than just tweaks and improvements in data collection. All right, with that, I'll turn it over to District Attorney Branson.
Thanks, Mike. Well, the things that you'd asked for me to kind of cover on and touch on, the things that we've been working on in the past is, of course, our internal program, which is the prosecutor-led substance use diversion program. As many of you may recall, that's the diversion program that we work with DECA and First Step. We're trying to get ladies out of the jail that have serious substance use disorder issues, get them into inpatient treatment program where they then transition into a housed intensive outpatient treatment program, and hopefully then work with reentry and transitional housing and get themselves kind of back on their feet. That program has been successful in diverting at least a half dozen women from the jail system that were the high utilizers of the female pod at the jail. So we've been very pleased with the program and the success we've had so far in that. You know, we've also worked with the pretrial release program, worked extensively with Pam and her crew to get that kind of up and going several years ago. We went through some growing pains with that, trying to get everybody kind of on the same page and make sure that we were understanding how the program was to be used and making sure that everybody on the front line was kind of aware of what was going on, and I think including the judges too, to make sure that was being successful. We were able to increase our concurrence rates in that from about 50–60% up to I think we were up to 80s there at some point in time. So that's been pretty good for trying to make sure that we're getting people out of the jail, trying to reduce the number of people that are in there that really don't need to be in there. The Assess, Identify, Divert program, the aid program that was out of jail, we've worked with them for a lot of years. They've been really instrumental in identifying people to go into our specialty programs. Unfortunately, that position's been vacant for about a year now. And I think that's something we really need to address. And I think that's some of the I think the sheriff's department has a role in that. The Burton Ash and the city have a role in that. And I really hope that we're able to get that position filled and get that person back in place out there, because again, like I said, they were really helpful and instrumental in getting us identities of people that would participate potentially in our problem-solving courts. So our problem-solving courts, of course, we have a behavioral health court that has been going now for right at about 4 years. That program is pretty robust. I think it's doing really well. We've graduated, 20 plus, probably close to 30 people from that program at this point in time. And I think it's done a really, really nice job keeping people out of the system and stretching out the length of contacts that we have with some of those folks. A drug court program just started this year. It's a pilot program. It's I think what Judge Huff is kind of calling the Missouri model. It's kind of based upon a Missouri model of post-conviction but pre-sentencing. I know we're going to probably want to take a look at how that actually works over time. But as a pilot program, it's my understanding that Judge Huff wants to keep it in this format. And so since the judge is running the drug court program, that's what's going to happen. COVID-19 hit, of course, right after we started that program, and that really made it difficult to get people into the program. But we're starting to see folks match up with the program and start entering back into the program now. We had 2 when we very first started out, and I think we're up to 5 or 6 now. So we also continue working with, again, Pam's group with House Arrest Program. We've been working with the Data-Driven Justice Initiative and Stepping Up Initiative to try to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get our data lined out and make sure that we're looking at the right data points for stuff we need to do. Some of the new stuff that we are working on, you want to switch over slides there, Mike?
There you go, sir.
Thanks. Some of the things we've been working on, we've been working closely with Dr. Cravens there and folks in my office and at Criminal Justice Services. What we've been trying to do is put together a list of people that are being held pre-trial, trying to figure out ways to advance those cases as quickly as we possibly can. So we have created a form that gives us a lot of information on somebody that's in custody. What we're doing is we're having Matt run a in-custody list every Monday. I have 2 attorneys in my office assigned to reviewing that list. They're selecting, at this point in time, 5 people from that list. That list is then being given to pretrial services and reentry to work up an assessment on them to see exactly where they're at, what their charges are, how long they've been held, any programs or anything like that they're involved at the jail. And then we are doing everything we can to try to advance those cases and get a resolution of those cases as quickly as possibly can by trying to contact the defense attorney and making sure that the defense attorney understands that there is an open offer standing on that case and that we're trying to get those people resolved and moved out of the jail. We are continuing to work with GARE, Government Alliance on Race and Equity. We are looking at getting some training for their racial equity toolkit for our subcommittee. And then we're hopeful to start being able to tackle some of the policies and procedures in our office using that toolkit to make sure that we are intentionally looking at equity as we move through our processes in our office. And finally, we've assigned our media IT person in our office to the Criminal Justice Data Collaborative to try to make sure that we can get our information from our full case system over to Dr. Cravens and everybody else to try to make sure that we've got a usable set of data we can analyze and work with. So that's what we've been working on.
Thank you, Attorney Branson. Anybody have any questions? All right, quiet group today.
Will there be a point where we will be able to get summaries of the case review process, the people who are being looked at, so that we too can understand what kinds of things they're being charged with, and just basically the characteristics of their cases?
So are you referring to the ones that we're selecting for pretrial review, or just cases?
Yes, you said there were 5 at this point.
Well,
So,
5 a week, right?
oh, but they're more. They're just, you do deal with them 5 at a time.
Right. What we're selecting to do is trying to focus on 5 at a time and make sure that those cases are being prioritized to try to move as quickly as we can. Then the next week we'll identify 5 different cases to make sure that we've contacted the attorney in our office, make sure the defense attorney's been contacted, make sure everybody is being made aware that these cases are being prioritized to try to move as quickly as we can.
At some point after you have reviewed a certain number of those, will it be possible for, I hear you saying Matt is looking at them and working on this with you, but I am really interested in the characteristics of these people, the crimes they've committed, I don't know what characteristics you're looking at, and I would like to know more about that.
Yeah, we plan to collect that data. So we're going to try to compile it from week to week, so we can try to look at any trends or anything in there. It's kind of our first step in being able to say, okay, look, what's common about all these folks that are being held?
That's right.
What are the characteristics? What are the things that we need to look out for? What are the things that we can change down the line? What is the information we can glean from this data that helps us to be able to process these cases quickly and faster, and identify why it is that they're in jail in the first place.
And who did you say besides you and Matt that are involved in that process?
So there's 2 attorneys from my office that'll be looking at the list that Matt creates. They'll be in charge of making sure, they'll be in charge of trying to identify the first 5 cases every week. Then it'll be reentry and pretrial services that will do the workup of the form that we've been trying to develop. And then it'll be back to the attorneys in my office to make sure that they're going through a process of touching base with the attorney in my office that's handling the case, making sure defense attorney contact has been made, that offers are out there and everything, that we can then try to move the case forward as fast as we can. The other thing they're going to be looking for is essentially what's the holdup? Why if there's an offer on the case and the defense attorney's been notified, what's the next step that's taking time? Maybe it's that the offer's been rejected and the case is going to go to trial. Maybe it's that there's difficulty because of a farm out communicating with the defendant because they're in another jail. Maybe it's a matter of having an evaluation or something like that done, or getting in front of the court. So we'll be trying to identify the things after the case has been made a priority. What types of things are then occurring afterwards that are lengthening your time out?
Hey, Charles, this is Pam.
Yeah.
Do you think we could do like an update at the next meeting about how it's working just
Absolutely.
in the first phase? That might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just to provide a little more clarity, the goal here is everyone who's sitting in the jail pre-trial, that case gets a good close look once a month, if not more frequently. And so we're not looking to analyze cases. We're looking to make sure cases are moving in an efficient manner, and that cases that are, for those who may not know, Charles or Judge, correct me if I'm wrong, probably 95% or more of the cases sitting in the jail will be dissolved via plea agreement. And the goal here is to make sure that we're moving towards agreements that are fair and appropriate in a swift manner. Cases that require the due process of going to trial, we're not going to try to move those cases more quickly. We want to make sure people have their due process. But a large portion of our cases, and that's the goal of the district attorney here, is to move things along, which would create space.
Yeah, we're really trying to identify why, when somebody's pre-trial, those cases languish. The fact that somebody is sitting in jail usually should be incentive enough to get the case resolved pretty darn fast. But, for a lot of reasons, that just doesn't end up happening. And we need to figure out ways to kind of fast track these cases so they're out of there quicker.
Charles, in terms of the problem-solving courts, I'm curious to know about the time from referral to those courts to acceptance into those programs. I know that's something we looked at a while ago, and I'm wondering if there's any effort happening as we continue to look at, the mechanics and the timelines for what to get somebody into one of those programs.
We continue to look at that. That is unfortunately, it's pretty sporadic. A lot of times it depends on, we have people that are referred for the specialty courts. Then if pretrial release kicks in and they're out of custody, then assessment can't be done quickly. Sometimes I know we have at least one in the women's diversion program that we've been waiting on for 2 months to try to get an assessment done. That we think it's somebody that would probably be able to participate in the program, but we haven't been able to get everything lined up for an assessment to be done on that purpose. And I know we've also had that issue in behavioral health court, is when somebody's then been out, is trying to get an assessment done so we can try to bring them into the program. So a lot of times if the assessment can be done when they're at the jail, that's usually going to be the quickest assessment we get done. And typically that will be done in a day or two. But if somebody is arrested, they hit pretrial services and they're out, then we may be months before we can get somebody lined up to do the assessment, because they may have travel issues, they may have transportation issues, calendaring issues, if you will, remembering to meet up with somebody and make an appointment to get something done. So a lot of those things kick in and really lengthen those times out for us.
Thanks, that's helpful to understand.
All right, we'll move on to the 7th Judicial District, Chief Judge James McCabery.
Well, I want to put a qualifier in that's probably unnecessary, because I think everybody understands. Mike started by saying he asked the different departments to figure out ways they could reduce their usage of the jail by 25%. There is no standard for the court that we haven't made a decision that we're going to reduce use by 25%. We use as we feel necessary in the context of any individual case, but we recognize that there's always new ways to look at things and new approaches to take. And so part of that has involved the addition of the problem-solving courts. The DA's office has been good about helping to make those a workable solution. It's not a high volume of people, but the hope is that we're hitting people that have a high incidence of in and out of the system, and taking a little bit slower, longer approach with those folks. The electronic notifications is designed to reduce the need to issue warrants for failing to appear, and Pam can probably speak to the particulars of that, but it's been very helpful. It's something that it's part of the pretrial supervision that I think more than anything else has given us options that we feel comfortable we can address the concerns of bond, which are that the person will fail to appear or there's a community safety issue. And when we know that we have people who can address that, then there's a greater level of comfort in not holding the person in custody, but having something in place to address those concerns that's not jail. So I think that addresses the issues on that slide. The newer initiatives that we're hoping to make part of sort of an overall efficiency for the court itself. We have a dedicated division that does nothing but criminal cases. The system that we've had in place in Douglas County for case assignments has been around since before I was able to figure out how it had been ever done differently. And for a while, in discussions with the defense bar, through our bench bar meetings, and really on the civil side, we just decided to make some changes. And one of those was the dedicated criminal division. The thought process being that criminal cases get handled in a particular way, that having them with a judge who has a lot of criminal law experience, who is highly organized, it's sort of our test to see, is this going to be something that can help the process or not? The increased court hearing by video appearance, I'm a huge fan of that. I think that it increases the ability of people to make their appearances in court and minimizes the impact on their daily lives to make those appearances. So I guess what I would say is part of what I see as an area that needs to be addressed or explored to help the efficiency of the system is to reduce the number of times that we have people showing up for court. Ideally, a person would make their first appearance, have an attorney appointed for the misdemeanor cases, and the fewer times that they have to show up for court, the better. The reason those appearances happen, I think, is something that needs to be studied. I won't go into it here because I think it's a little bit of speculation on my part, but getting discovery resolved quickly, getting plea offers out and decisions made, those sorts of things. The video appearances, to the extent that we have to have these status hearings and schedulings and resetting matters to another date, it just makes it so much easier for those people to do that. The more in-depth court appearances by video also facilitates, I think, efficiencies. It makes it easier for people to accommodate schedules and move forward. Each side, who are the litigants in those proceedings, are going to have opinions about whether any particular hearing is appropriate for video or not. The court may have some different views, but it just is another option that helps increase efficiencies. And then the establishment of the Criminal Justice Data Collaborative is just something that I am very interested in seeing what that produces, because we have all these numbers that different parts of the process are analyzing from their perspective. And I think everybody getting together and pointing out to the people who are looking at hard numbers why those numbers may be have developed in the way that they have. And the short example I would use is when I met with Dr. Cravens and Mike, and we were looking at the failure to appear numbers, we were able to winnow out and sort of delineate. There are people who are included in that number who do in fact have who are in custody for failures to appear, but they may have so many other cases or issues going that that's the real reason they're in custody. And so it's a matter of diving into the data and making it look tell us what we need to know, and sometimes only having eyes on it from people who are in different parts of the system can help illuminate the numbers more than just the numbers. So that ties into the reviewing the failure to appear data. Again, pretrial is helping with that. Video appearances helps with that. And then just figuring out what we really mean by people in custody on failure to appear versus is that a component of something else that's going on. So, you know, I'm just looking forward to taking these numbers apart and seeing what we can learn from them. And I appreciate the opportunity to do that with this collaborative. So I don't know if that raises questions for anybody in terms of what I'm trying to explain, but I'm glad to answer them if they're there.
This is Sarah, and I would just say I really appreciate the court's willingness and interest in particularly looking at failure to appear data. This has been a topic of conversation from the CJCC for a period of time, and we know the problem is multifaceted. We know the problem is got a lot of different layers and logistics to it, but you know, I think this has some real potential once we dig into this and take our pieces and pick it apart and develop strategies to address certain things that where we could really make an impact that that helps the whole system.
I'm hoping so.
Hi, I actually, this question might be more mature. It's a little bit of an extension of the point that Sarah just brought up. Judge McCabery, you postulated that if we're actually talking about reducing numbers at the jail, that it really makes the most sense. If I'm hearing you correctly, your argument is that the intervention needs to be before they're actually landing in the court. And so I'm curious from the other folks who are on today's agenda, is there agreement about that? Like, is that, because I'm trying to kind of figure out of all the stakeholders here, like where does that make the most sense to be focusing energy for that intervention? It sounds like if I'm hearing you correctly, it's sort of you've postulated a thought about that, and I would like to hear some further discussion from some of the other stakeholders if that.
Yeah. So I do hold that view, and I'm trying to think. I should be more careful and think about what I'm saying. What did I say today that led you to that? Because I do hold that view that the biggest impact is going to come on the front end. Once people are arrested, and again, you know, I think some perspective on this is helpful in that the vast majority of warrants that are served and people who are charged and cited, at least on the district court side, I mean, and it's actually a number I just thought about earlier today of visiting with Matt about, but the number of people who spend time in custody, we're only looking at the jail population. It'd be interesting to me to compare that to the total number of cases going through district court. Does that make sense? So there's a whole sort of set of data that I really haven't thought to look at until recently. And then, you know, what the data mining is going to allow us to do, or analysis, I don't know what's the right term, but, you know, there's been an uptick in the efficiencies, it seems to me, of the process in the last few years. And somewhere in that, we've got to figure that out. So that part, in my mind, my intuition is that's the processing of the cases, either on the court side, the attorney side, and when I say attorney, I mean DA and defense attorney. I think there's probably some impact as the result of the increased amount of information that's available to both sides, by which I primarily mean recordings from dash cams and from other sources are just create logistical issues with discovery, both disseminating it to the attorneys and then the attorney time it takes to get it done. So I don't mean to be saying that there's not things within the time that the case is charged and the case is resolved that can't be looked at, and there's not things for the court. But I think we're seeing right now the biggest impact has been whatever the decision-making process has been, to not arrest, as Trent said, cite and give people the opportunity to appear on the, for one part. But, you know, I'm interested in figuring out where the efficiencies have managed to hit a drag when it comes to the court side. For example, on the failure to appear data, and I know Sarah and Mike have heard me say this multiple times, and maybe people on this call, but for the judges, it's a head scratcher in that we know that when people fail to appear for court in district court, it is frequently resolved by asking the attorney, have you been in touch with your client? Can you get them here in a day or two? And, you know, we'll try to resolve it that way, or give them a date in the future to try and appear, even if it's not a day or two, depending on the case type. And, you know, we're just very flexible in getting those resolved. And pretrial has been a huge help in resolving some of those issues or preventing some of those issues. So somewhere from our perspective, we're trying to figure out why the failure to appear numbers are what they are. I feel like talking with Matt, I have a little bit better sense, but of those numbers are being counted and maybe not discerned in conjunction with some of the other reasons why people are in custody. So I guess I appreciate the question. I just don't want to be perceived as saying the courts don't have anything to do. And I'm interested in hearing what other people have to say as well. So sorry to intrude on the question so much. I just wanted to be understood in terms of I'm willing to look at it all.
Yeah, totally. And I would say where I heard it was kind of the reason why, to me, it flowed from Sarah's question is when you were talking about kind of successes of the failure to appear, and before you kind of went into that, you said your feeling was that a lot of those numbers were greatly affected by what happened before it's coming in. So that's why I was kind of building off of it there and saying less to try to create conflict, but just kind of saying that was sort of carving out a space that I'm curious for, again, the other stakeholders, is that consistent with what, you know, they're experiencing as well? Gotcha.
Now I hear where you're coming from in terms of the question, and so let me clarify. The person is in custody on a failure to appear, but that failure to appear warrant may have been served, and at the same time, the person has new charges pending, a probation violation pending, a KDOC hold. So that's where I say there's other things that influence that, in addition to some of the other issues I think you're suggesting, and I don't take any of it as you weren't trying to engender controversy. I just wasn't sure what I had said to prompt you to think that. So I'll stop talking and let others try to address the question.
And also on that one, Darren, I'm going to kick your question down the road a little bit, and to Lori and to Patrick. In Douglas County, we have a significant amount of resources that we're making available to people to avoid that court system, whether it's through mental health or through drug and alcohol crisis services. We have one work team under the Coordinating Council that will present in September around that, but also the Behavioral Health Leadership Council is doing a ton of work on this very issue. And I think our biggest hurdle there is getting people engaged in those services that are already available before they end up being connected to the criminal justice system. And so an expanding conversation around that, you're right, super important. And so I'm going to put on Lori and Patrick's plate that a presentation from the Behavioral Health Leadership Council might be in order to talk about some of that work.
You know, Mike, I think that Charles' previous point also, I mean, I think these things actually are aligned as I listen to Darren, which there are some steps that could happen, you know, between pretrial and the next step to make sure that that assessment happens quicker, for example, right? I mean, are there some care coordination steps that could be taken in that space that Darren is identifying to ensure that someone engages, gets the assessment done, and is doing kind of those pieces of work.
I want to keep us on time and focused, and let me, I guess this is the best way I can explain why the partners aren't talking a lot about that work in this presentation today, is that bookings into jail are not driving our increased jail population. As Captain McKinley said, bookings are way down. Our 19-year average for that facility is 5,600 bookings a year. Last year, we booked 4,300 people, and yet the jail population was over capacity. So we have invested a lot of work in those things, part of the Stepping Up initiative and so forth, but that's not driving our jail population to be overpopulated and for our facility to be over full. Those things are super important and super passionate of mine and Bob, and we talk about them frequently, but that's not what's preventing our jail from being able to house our inmates. So.
One thing I'd just like to kind of throw in there to maybe help Darren a little bit, some of the stuff that we're looking at, we run misdemeanors in custody or query every now and then to look and see who is in there that are associated with district court. The last query I have has 19 people in custody on misdemeanors somehow. Of the 19, there's only 4 that have a single case. The rest of them have a combination of multiple cases, municipal violations, probation violations, or holds from other jurisdictions out of that 19. So, I think that's really, it kind of goes back to what Judge McCabery was saying. We're realizing that, these folks aren't just kind of one-off sitting there all by themselves. They're sitting there because they've got maybe 4 different cases to resolve. I've got one here, it's got 4 different cases. 2 of them are municipal court, one's a probation violation, then one's a new case in our court. So not only do they have to be resolved in district court, but they've got to be resolved in municipal court before we can get them out of our jail system. And so those end up being a lot more complicated just because they have so many different contacts and they're dealing with different courts at the same time.
All right, thanks, Charles. And Darren, we're going to table that conversation. We will come back to it. I do think it's super important. I don't want to.
What
Is that Tamara?
some out here, I mean, is this a problem with communication between defense?
I'm sorry, Tamara, you're breaking up. Did anyone get her question?
No.
Tamara, if you want to send me a text, you're breaking up there. I'll be glad to forward your question to the group.
Then maybe in the interest of time, we could keep moving.
Yeah. We're going to jump over to Judge Miller with Lawrence Municipal Court.
Okay, as a preface, I probably need to echo Judge McCabery's comments. I'm not in a position, I think the rules of judicial conduct would prohibit me from subscribing to a challenge, making any commitments in regard to a specific reduction of jail. But I will tell you that the Lawrence Municipal Court has been working on programs that influence jail numbers. We've done it historically, and we continue to do that. One example would be the first thing listed on the slide, the September 2016 decision to modify our bond schedule to an OR bond schedule. Now the slide itself is a little strong in the wording because that decision doesn't apply to all bookings into jail. It applies to all bookings on new arrests into jail, with the exception of those people who've been arrested and not yet arraigned on a prior case. So if someone gets a case, gets arrested, gets released on no OR bond before they've seen a judge, gets arrested again, they don't automatically get released on no OR bond. The reason for the decision, obviously, is that in this situation, the 2 reasons that bail is granted or not granted involve public safety and failure to appear risk. And money, especially small amounts of money in that situation, probably is not the best way to analyze that risk. And it's unfair towards people who may not have the financial wherewithal, but may not pose a public safety risk or a failure to appear risk. So that's why we made the decision to do that. It doesn't automatically reduce the number of people in jail. It reduces the intensity of jail stays. If people are arrested and booked into jail, they may spend an hour or two being booked into jail, the bond paperwork being prepared and then released, as opposed to a day before they get to see a judge. In addition to that, we implemented a phone call system that's non-electronic. It's live phone calls. We started that about 2 years ago. The purpose of that is to reduce our failure to appear rate for people who forget their court date or otherwise aren't aware they have a court date. We had high hopes. The initial data that I analyzed revealed that there was a reduction coming up upon the 2-year mark for this program. We're going to do another data analysis. The reduction wasn't as high as I hoped it would be. And one of the reasons for that is the difficulty in getting good phone numbers from people initially in the process. The reduction that we saw, or the information that we saw, shows us that if we actually get in contact with somebody, if someone actually talks to them, their failure to appear rates are very low. But for the people who don't have numbers and we don't have any means to communicate, the failure to appear rates are very high. So that would be something to look at, and we are looking at it with a subsequent means of communicating with people, and that's text notification that I'll talk about on the next slide. Recently, like many other courts, we've begun to participate in video conference hearings. We have a little different issue with municipal court with access to justice issues, because a lot of the people that we deal with are self-represented, and the investment in order to have a stable internet connection, a webcam, a device that's able to connect to the video conferencing software, it's not negligible. So we just implemented that a short period of time ago, but we see a lot of participation with people who are represented by attorneys. The pro se people are lagging behind a little bit, even though everyone has been notified that that is available. That option really hasn't been pursued. A couple of other things, we're big participants in house arrest historically, especially for people who are serving mandatory minimum sentences. And we have a program that was implemented a few years ago in collaboration with the KU School of Social Welfare. The purpose of the program was to get practitioners, frontline practitioners, for drug and alcohol counseling, or at least screening, and make the connection in court between people who might have drug or alcohol problems and the treatment. Last year, that morphed into a situation where Burt Nash was sending one of its intake workers to court hearings. And that was only interrupted as a result of COVID-19. So we expect once COVID-19 settles down a little bit, and hopefully it will, we'll have an opportunity to reinitiate that program. And the idea, of course, is that you have a warm handoff between someone who needs the services at court to the actual treatment facilities, and that would increase adherence to treatment recommendations. I will say that sometimes people who haven't really been, have mental health problems or substance abuse problems, who haven't really had those involved directly in their case or their case facts, have still accessed these services. So I think having the services available in more places where someone may come into contact is a good thing. Now, talking about new initiatives, I preface things about the full court or the text notification program. We're a test bed. We're the initial test court for our court management software is called Full Court, and the company that runs that is Justice Systems. And we're the initial test court for an integrated text notification program that not only notifies people about their court dates, but ultimately can be expanded with information about warrants or payments due. We just initiated that within the last couple of months. we'll have to see what impact that has on failure to appear rates. Something else I've been looking at, I was exposed to earlier this spring at a program, is I want to do some analysis regarding the Renew program that Birmingham, Alabama, and some other courts have adopted. Now, the press release that's linked relates to that program. The website that is linked does not relate to that program. It relates to a different program in Alabama. But the whole idea behind the Renew program is that driver's licenses are very important. They're important in this context because they can also drive jail population. They do that through minimum mandatory sentences on driving while suspended cases. And the idea behind the program is really threefold. First of all, courts have to incentivize participation in the program somehow. That can be through potential reduction of fines where it's allowed by law, perhaps if prosecutors are involved with the program, it can lead to amendments of charges or diversions of charges. The second thing it takes a case management approach to this issue. There are people who are involved in case management. And the idea, of course, is a lot of times people are suspended in multiple different locations and have no idea how to get their license back. So the case manager helps untangle things not only in the court that the case is being managed, but tries to identify and tries to remove impediments to people getting their driver's licenses back in other courts. In some circumstances, that would also involve the potential appointment of an attorney or the work of an attorney to help them with that. And then the last thing that is involved in the program is some help with the actual technical requirements of getting a driver's license. Being able to participate meaningfully in the testing process also is difficult for a lot of people. Now, Alabama has a problem that really doesn't exist to the same extent as Kansas does. Alabama has a large illiteracy problem. Our illiteracy problem is lower. Based upon national statistics, but there's still people who struggle with the ability to learn the technical rules required to get a driver's license out of a book. And what happens is some of those people are so demoralized by the process that they never get a license in the first place and they just start driving. What happens then is they get caught driving without a license. The state generates and suspends the license for them. And they start working up the driving while suspended chain, and that is ruinous, both from a perspective of jail days as well as the impact on people's lives. So Birmingham's got about twice the population Lawrence does. It's got 9 municipal court judges. We have 1. It's a different jurisdiction, but I think some of these ideas may be worth looking into, and these may have an impact on jail population. We're also interested in participating in the Criminal Justice Data Collaborative. And I should note that the current project that the Alternatives to Incarceration group is working on also has a potential to impact jail days for municipal court.
Thank you, Judge. We're about 12 minutes behind, so we're going to ask Pam Wiegand and Captain Hauk to go at light speed, and we'll finish questions with time left in our meeting today.
I will try and talk at light speed. I think Charles did a great job already talking about the first 3 items. I will just say that pretrial supervision, we are now supervising more individuals on pretrial than we have in jail. I think our number was over 180 last week, 180 clients that we're supervising on pretrial supervision. House arrest is really robust. We're seeing about 80 clients that we're monitoring on some kind of electronic monitoring, with 25 of those being on house arrest. Pretrial software just helps us with electronic reminders. We've turned that on since COVID. We're asking if there's a way for us to do text messaging and phone calls, and we're waiting for a reply back from CE Pretrial. You can move to the next slide. As I said before, we're going to try and look and see how we can identify those folks who had notice to appears who wouldn't necessarily come through the jail system, but who still need reminders, and we haven't identified how exactly we're going to pull those people into the CE pretrial for phone calls. We definitely want to improve our data sharing between reentry, Burt Nash, DECA, and community corrections. So we can, those folks who are identified having mental health or drug and alcohol needs, we would know right away and could get them into services faster, hopefully expediting folks' time with us. We're still working on a transportation service for clients who have transportation needs. We currently give bus passes, but we want to look into helping people get to services and get to court in a timely way through either some kind of job, ride share program at the county level. And then once again, we're assigning a staff member to the Criminal Justice Collaborative to look at data.
All right, thanks, Pam.
You're welcome.
Captain Houck, I understand you've been designated by the sheriff to present, so I'll let you take over.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. Here's a list of a lot of the things that we've been working on for many years in the sheriff's office. The previous sheriffs have devoted their time and their energy and staff and resources to do what we can to prevent and lower the number of individuals that are incarcerated and help them individuals as we move them and transition them from our facility out into the community. I'm not going to read through all of them. One thing that I would like to just do a little clarification on is we are still doing the AID program. Paul Leffingwell took that over, and when we do get that full-time person back, they'll step back in there. So we're still doing that program. These are things that the sheriff and the sheriff's office and our staff truly believe in. We work hand in hand with courts, with attorneys, obviously with plenty of the groups there in the community. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can to try to help out with those community partners and obviously our partners in the law enforcement and judicial system. New initiatives. As Mike had asked, I'm trying to kind of breeze through this fairly quickly, so I'll try to answer any questions we may have at the end. Here again, we've worked with court services, community corrections, pretrial, intensive supervision. We're trying to work as much as we can, helping with data share with the district attorney's office to help identifying once those individuals are identified and handing us the information, we can turn around and supply as much tangible information that will help everybody in that system to, help hopefully the attorneys, the district attorney, and the judges make good decisions or decisions based on the information that they're provided to potentially make some movement within the system. Here again, we're also helping with the Criminal Justice Data Collaborative. The Sheriff's Office has tried to be as much as we can out front, helping with that, whether it was MyRC and the Data Driven Justice Initiative, or with any other item as far as opening up our doors to help with those community and judicial partners.
All right. So we're a few minutes behind yet, but does anyone have any questions on working with the jail population, trying to decrease it here, and the efforts that have been presented?
So I hate to be this, hopefully this doesn't slow it down, but since both Judge Miller and Judge McCabe brought this up, with the video conferencing, I just want to make sure that I understand exactly how that's working, or video appearance. I mean, is that for inmates at the jail? There's a hookup there for them to do their video appearance, or is it something else? Since it does sound like that access to technology came in a little bit to Judge Miller's.
Well, it's something else. It's doing the same thing we're doing now, having a hearing over the Zoom platform, basically.
Okay, so it could be someone appearing at their attorney's office, at their home, or anything along those lines?
Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I'll have questions later. I'll pause now.
That's a good clarification. Anyone else? All right, we're going to keep moving through the agenda here. Well, let's see here. Maybe my thing to forward. There we go. So You've just heard some of the different data pieces, and Dr. Craven's referred to. So these are some of the various data projects that we are working on. We intend for our August CJCC meeting to have kind of a brainstorming session and discussion on failure to appear data. The district court and Dr. Cravens are working on breaking down the data so we can really have an informed discussion. So that'll be forthcoming, and I know Judge Miller is going to be jumping in on that as well. So I'm going to keep moving on to Mayor Ananda. So you're on mute, Mayor.
Rookie mistake. Thank you, and I will be brief as well. Matt Cravens is working with the DA's office and the district court to look at the racial demographics on charging decisions. The DA's office has been working with them to provide that data. I know the DA has been very supportive in this process, so that is ongoing. The district court judges requested, and they participated in the booking and incarceration racial presentation from Matt Cravens. And now they are working to look at disparities in other areas of their decisions. Charles Epp will be leading several focus groups through KU. They're going to help us gather information through those focus groups. And there may be additional community focus groups associated with that. This last point is a recommendation from a member of the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Work Group. We aren't sure how to answer this question yet, but I think that it is a worthwhile question for us to continue to consider as we move forward in these processes. That's all I got. Thank you.
Any questions for Mayor Ananda or members of the Racial Disparities Work Group?
So what's up next?
So I know currently that Matt is working with the DA's office, and they are putting together a data set to look at bond and how that's being assigned. And so I think that's the first piece of data that'll go to the work group. I'm assuming that's probably going to lead to more questions and continue to drill down in that data. Am I missing a piece, members of the work group?
I would just,
as we're looking at the focus groups and the information from those, we'll get a clearer understanding of some next steps as well. And what are the questions that we haven't been asking? You know, I think that last question represents one of those questions at least. And so how can we continue asking those questions while coming up with concrete next steps as well?
so I would simply add to the presentation just a brief point. A lot of the discussion today, looking at processes in the police, in the courts, and in earlier stages in the process, focuses on moving people through more efficiently and identifying places where efficiencies can be increased. And what we're looking at in the racial disparities part of the analysis is, are there disparities by race in any of those processes along through the way? Because that's an equally significant set of questions. You know, we might be moving very efficiently, but also at the same time generating pretty significant racial disparities. And if that's true, we want to identify them and address them. Hopefully we're not, but we need to answer that question. And we do know from Dr. Craven's earlier analysis that there are some pretty significant disparities. And so we want to identify where that's occurring and then start thinking about how we can address those.
You know, one of the changes that we've made is now anytime we pull a data set, we're pulling demographic information with that data set. It's surprising how many times you go back to a data set you pulled with new questions. And so we feel it's important to always include that. It's not something that we did in the past.
This is Sarah. The only thing I would add is that if once the information on the focus groups and how that process is going to work, I just would love us to be able to amplify that work and elevate it and make sure the community knows that we're doing work in that regard. So if we can, as it kind of becomes a little bit more formed, like just make sure we can all elevate that.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, that's really important, and I appreciate it.
And one thing I guess I forgot to put in the presentation is following the presentation in last month, the 7th Judicial District judges all wanted to hear that presentation. They'd heard about it, and so Dr. Cravens provided that to them. They had a lot of good questions and are very interested in helping with the data. And then we've had the League of Women Voters has asked for that presentation, so that is happening this Thursday. And then a local church has also asked for that data, and I know I will get the church's name wrong. So unless Dr. Cravens wants to jump in, I'll leave it at that. So, you know, we're willing to share and be open and honest about the data and to educate the community. And, you know, the reality is we know we need to work, and we appreciate their support in doing that.
Mike, it's the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship.
Thanks, man. Lori Alvarado, I skipped you in the agenda, so would you like to give us an update on the Prevention Summit?
I can do that. Through the behavioral health, the Douglas County Behavioral Health Coalition, DECA has been asked to coordinate we usually do a behavioral health prevention summit face-to-face in the fall. With all of the COVID related issues, the county and the coalition and DECA decided we should probably just go ahead and move that online. We also had a request from the schools to move it earlier in the year so that the school district personnel could participate in some of the valuable information being shared. And so with that, we decided to do it in July, and obviously face-to-face is probably not the best way to do that when we expect more than 200 people in the same place. So we have moved it online. And can I share my screen? I don't know that I can. Okay, I won't share, I'll just tell you. If you go to www.deca.org, you will see a tab at the very top right hand that says training and events. And if you click on that, there's a tab for the 2020 Douglas County Behavioral Health Prevention Summit. And you can see the agenda. It's open right now. We have about 170 people who have already registered for the various workshops. And we have decided to do the workshops over lunchtime, 12 to 1. There will be one every workday between July 27th and the last one will be August 6th. And I just wanted to take a minute and highlight a couple that I think might be helpful to this group as we think about different things that we might be pursuing. Our keynote is being delivered on July 29th, 12 to 1 by Dennis Embry, Dr. Dennis Embry. He is a KU graduate and is working on some prevention strategies early on with families and schools and communities, and he'll be giving that keynote on the 29th. Another one that I would highlight a little bit is perhaps working with youth who engage in self-harm as we talk about criminal justice and we talk about younger people being engaged. And when we talk about youth, we're talking 21 and younger. That one is being conducted by the School of Social Welfare at KU, July 31st, 12 to 1. We also have a whole session on marijuana policy and prevention, August 3rd, 12 to 1, really talking about marijuana policy literacy and how that's happening in the prevention approach. And given a lot of the legalization issues that are coming across the communities and the states and on the national environment, it's important to talk about policy and prevention. So that's another one. We also have one on brain science and trauma in the criminal justice system with the things that happen with folks that lead to trauma. That is a session that I think will be very, very good, August 4th at the same time. And then finally, one session that I think is important for us to think about is Handle with Care. And that is August the 7th, 12 to 1. That is a program that we've already begun to implement in the county. And that's where the schools and law enforcement work together. If there's an incident at a house, the school district where children are present, the school district is gets a heads up so that perhaps we understand that trauma might be very, very, very apparent with children in the school district, and that we're handling them with care during the school day and understanding how to intervene in more positive ways. So I would suggest if any of these, and there are others listed, vaping is another topic that we'll be sharing about. If any of those are of interest, you can register for one or all. All of them are free of charge for Douglas County residents, and I would encourage you to jump on our website and get registered for any that seem relevant to you or interesting. So that's what I have. Tried to make it short. If anybody has questions, you can certainly email me or let me know how we can help.
Thank you.
Hey, Lori, I have enabled you to share your screen. So at the end of the meeting,
Okay.
if you would mind putting that up?
Sure, absolutely.
I will email the link to all the council members.
Perfect.
Are you going to talk to the city commission meeting?
We've received an invite by the city commission. They would like a presentation of what the CJCC has done and what we're currently doing. And that is a broad ask. So I asked, do we get 3-4 hours? What's the timeline? I said, they told me 45 minutes. So I wanted to seek feedback from the council as to what you think we should prioritize. And of course, and we have Mayor Nada here and City Manager Craig Owens. So thoughts, opinions? Anyone want to join me in the presentation?
I would just say, while Mike is going to prepare a presentation, I do think it is really important that other members of the CJCC are also a part of this. I just think this is I'm very proud of this group, and it's such a extensive group with a ton of experience, and we need to make sure the city commission knows that. And so if others besides just staff have time to make that work, it would be awesome.
Do you have the date, Mike?
We're penciled in for July 28th at 5:45 p.m. My understanding it's scheduled for Zoom, but I could be incorrect.
Okay.
Mayor Nod is shaking her head yes. So.
Yes, it is.
And Mayor, did you have any direction for us on this presentation, or could you know specifically what the commission might be more interested in?
Yeah, I can speak a little to that. I was interested to hear what the group had, and I would certainly encourage Craig to speak up as well. As many of you probably know, the commission is working on several items for review for the commission to consider over the next several months. And certainly if there is any data or information that you feel would be relevant to any of those items, that would be helpful. I think too, just understanding the breadth of the work that we have done through this group. It's certainly one of the groups that I'm very proud of being on, and the collaboration and the work that we're doing. Being able to express that to the full commission, I think is really going to be helpful in understanding our role over the next several months.
I think it might be also helpful. I think it might be helpful too to kind of talk about the programming that we're doing that will help the city reduce their need for the jail, like house arrest, the things like that. So we kind of emphasize the work we're doing that helps the city directly.
Yeah, this is Craig, and nice to meet some of you for the first time. We also understood that you are interested in having us participate in a little more active way. in this group, and we certainly are interested in that, and you should expect my participation and other staff participation. So your last comment there was, how can we help, but also what can we do differently or better in increasing our interactions here, and that would be something that I think would be helpful to discuss during the meeting.
This is Sarah, and to that end, I keep muting myself. One of the things I think would be good if we have a few minutes to insert into that presentation, Mike, would be to talk about the mobile crisis response work group and the work that they've done. They made a presentation to the county commission in June. So I know they already have a ton of great information available. And I know that's something that the city has talked about in terms of that response. And I'd like also to hear a little bit more about how my understanding of that is that will have to work very closely with co-responders and that program. So that's another specific area where we really need a really robust co-responder program to make sure we have an effective mobile crisis response team. So that I just think some ways to talk about how we can maybe dig in a little deeper on that would be great.
I agree, and that's the questions that Darren asked earlier. That's where a lot of that information lies. Yeah.
So if Lori or Patrick or anybody from that committee was available to be on the call, that might be helpful as well.
I'm available, or one of our staff can be available for that if you need anything from the substance abuse side.
Well, I'll find something for you, Lori. I promise.
I figured you would.
All right.
Some great suggestions. I think our work group updates are just read-only documents, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so in closing the session, are there any comments, suggestions, recommendations from today's meeting that you want us to move forward? I think there are a couple of things we wanted to follow up on. Co-responder was one of those. And then having a review next month about the DA's review process and how that's going. So we'll definitely add those to the agenda next time. Does anybody have any other suggestions? Do we have anything else for the good of the order? Yeah, Sarah?
Just add that, when the racial disparities work group gets the information on focus groups, that we elevate that to CJCC and more organizations as well. So just add that to the to-do list.
Okay, we can put that on future and see where we're at time-wise.
I'd also like to make a general suggestion here. I think this is the opportunity for that. So I applaud the broader group for developing that goal of reducing entry to the jail by 25%, or jail population, I guess it is, by 25%. That's really an important thing to start thinking about outcomes, like what are we aiming for? I think that's an important step. Could I suggest that we add to that an aspiration that we reduce racial disparities in the process as well? Because we are at this point generating racial disparities, and we need to keep in mind that goal ought to be part of our outcome, our aspirational outcome as well.
Great suggestion.
Dr. Upton, I agree. I think that might be a really interesting challenge to the, how do we do that in this conversation about as reducing population and managing population? Are there others? I think some of the data and information you'll be getting in the work group will help inform that conversation.
I agree. I think that on this question, we need to rely on data to identify where the disparities are arising from and how we can address them. So we can't solve it without data. data will not be enough. We also need will to move ahead. And I think we're developing both of those at this point. So thank you.
Anything else? To go to the order, seeing none, the meeting today will be adjourned. Our next meeting is August 11th. I assume it will be over Zoom, Mike, unless something dramatically changes.
As of right now, we do have the Public Works Conference Room, which is a building that allows us to do Zoom and in person. And we'll continue to evaluate that as we get feedback from the health department.
Keep everybody informed. We'll inform before the next meeting. Thank you, everybody. This is great discussion.
Thank you.